A team that went 17-0 in a month. A team that had 5 starters all named as players of the month. A man that nearly hit half of his three-pointers all season. All the perfect ingredients for a team that could have destroyed LeBron's 8 straight NBA Finals legacy. You may be wondering, what stopped this squad? Well, it was a perfect storm of load management, a NYPD racial incident, and a flurry of untimely injuries. LeBron James ruined countless Eastern Conference stars on his way to 8 straight finals. Paul Pierce, Derrick Rose, and Paul George all fell victim to playoff LeBron. But one of the forgotten teams he took out was a unique 60-win team without a superstar. The 2014-15 Atlanta Hawks may not be remembered, but they were a juggernaut in the regular season and had the pieces to take down the King. Unfortunately, misfortune after misfortune robbed them of the chance. So they'll go down as a forgotten 1 seed despite their unusual dominance in the regular season. This is a ClutchPoints original on the 60-win team even some serious NBA fans have forgotten about, the 2014-15 Atlanta Hawks. And how it easily could have been them instead of the Warriors raising a championship banner that year. In 2014, the Atlanta Hawks were the exact opposite of a contender, a typical contender like the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs, of course, boasted their new superstar Big Three of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, and LeBron James. The Hawks, though, flew under the radar. They had no top 20 player in the league heading into the season. In the land, the Cavs relied heavily on isolation, where Kyrie and LeBron could go one-on-one and have their way with defenders. In Atlanta, though, the Hawks used a motion offense that thrived off of passing and player movement, as they'd finished the year second in assists. The Hawks and Cavs were 2 teams at opposite ends of the spectrum, but it was the superstar-less Hawks who reached the coveted mark of 60 wins in a season. The Hawks claimed the 1 seed after their dominant regular season, but the Cavs got the last laugh. A quiet exit dismantled their season and crippled their future. The year before, in the 2013-14 season, they had a losing record and barely squeaked into the playoffs. But that summer, they didn't make a superstar splash in free agency. No flashy trades. Just the same guys, now healthy and determined, coming back with the same coach, Mike Budenholzer. Bud was in his 2nd year as a head coach, having won 4 titles as an assistant coach with Greg Popovich. The Hawks' biggest addition was probably trading for defensive stalwart Thabo Sefolosha in the summer. Outside of that, they had the gang back together, and they all played their roles to perfection. Al Horford was a smart defensive anchor, Kyle Korver was the lethal sharpshooter, Paul Millsap was the glue guy who did all the little things, DeMarre Carroll was a versatile 3-and-D wing, and Jeff Teague was the engine that made the machine run. They gelled so well that 4 of the 5 starters were named All-Stars. It was the only All-Star appearance for Teague and Korver in their careers. Individually, these players may not have been anything special, but playing alongside each other, all their games were elevated. And all 5 starters were named Player of the Month in January 2015. No, that's not a typo. The reason? The Hawks went a perfect 17-0 over the month, in the midst of a stretch where they went 33-2. They were on a tear that propelled them to the top of the Eastern Conference to the surprise of many. In February, they had a showdown with their Western counterpart, the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors were also a team on the rise, holding the top spot in the West. They also had a motion offense centered around player movement. They also excelled at outside shooting. And they also had a coach who was a disciple of Coach Pop. So when they met for the first time in February, it was dubbed by many as a finals preview. Phillips Arena was rocking as fans rallied behind this upstart Hawks team. The Hawks rode their crowd and their signature balance, with 7 players scoring in double figures to a win against the eventual champs. These Hawks looked far different than the first or second round exit teams of the recent past. They had chemistry, great passing, and unselfish play. And they had fan favorite Kyle Korver shooting a blistering 49% from 3 that year. His 49% from 3 led the league by far, and not even Steph Curry has had a season where he hit 49% from downtown. It was hard not to like this team. Riding high, the Hawks' first sign of a slowdown was the end of the year. Budenholzer wanted to rest his players to keep them fresh for the playoff run. So he took a page from Popovich and rested his key guys down the stretch. But load management broke their momentum. For a team that thrived on a balanced approach, sitting guys out threw them off. The rare case of load management actually hurting a team. They finished the season on a bumpy 13-10 stretch, and they limped into the playoffs instead of blazing in red hot. They needed 6 games to get past the 8th seed, the Brooklyn Nets. They needed another 6 games to put away the Washington Wizards. Still, they found themselves 4 games away from the finals. All that stood in their way was the team at the other end of the spectrum. LeBron, Kyrie, and the Cavs' ISO-heavy approach awaited them. The 60-win Hawks may have stood a fighting chance to take down the King. After all, the Hawks went 3-1 against the Cavs in the regular season. But they never really got that chance. DeMarre Carroll was in crutches after Game 1 with a sprained ankle and bone bruise. He fought through it and played the rest of the series, but not at a 100%. Kyle Korver suffered an ankle injury in Game 2 and was out the remainder of the series. Al Horford was ejected in the second quarter of a critical Game 3. But one of the strangest parts of this was that Thabo Sefolosha missed the entire playoffs. While not a scorer, Sefolosha was a superb defender and could have at least provided a little help guarding the Cavs stars. But the bizarre part was that his injury didn't even happen on the basketball court. It was the NYPD who broke his leg and ended his season. In April, Sefolosha was leaving a nightclub in New York. Thabo, a tall black man in a hoodie, was walking away from the club when a few officers who were white followed him. The scene, unfortunately, is all too familiar. One officer reportedly told him, "With or without a badge, I'm going to f*** you up." Sefolosha, who had done nothing wrong, was then pinned down as 2 or 3 officers attacked him. He came out of it with a broken fibula. Thabo was later found not guilty for resisting arrest or disorderly conduct, and was acquitted on all charges. On the basketball court, though, Sefolosha would be out for the entire playoffs. It was the perfect storm. The Hawks ran out of steam against the Cavs and were swept in 4 games. Hopes of a title for one of the best teams in Hawks franchise history came crashing down. Still, the future looked bright for ATL. But instead of bringing the squad back, the team was pulled apart, piece by piece. Because of their success, DeMarre Carroll was offered a lucrative contract by the Raptors and left. Jeff Teague was traded the following year in 2016. Al Horford left that summer as well. Kyle Korver was traded several months later, and Paul Millsap left in free agency in 2017. Just a couple of years after their phenomenal season, there was barely any part of the team left. Their 22-game turnaround from 2013-14 showed the growth of the players, how well they gelled on the court, and their buy-in to an unselfish system. But instead of building on that, the Hawks flew back to the ground. For just 1 year, they can say they were flying high. They were a 60-win team that dominated the regular season. They were a perfectly balanced unit, the forgotten 1 seed, living on only as proof of what you can do without a star in a star-driven league.